WFH with two guys. Now here's Benny and Dennis.
Dennis, this is a topic I think for us as we're recording this, daylight savings just occurred not too long ago, and I know that, I don't know if you know, here in Colorado, we voted to eliminate daylight savings time, and the rationale, we've kind of gotten used to it, but yeah, there's a lot of people who are really against daylight savings. I perhaps, am one guy, like, I don't know why we need it. What's your perspective on it?
Yeah, it's one of those. I grew up in Central Indiana when I was a kid, and we were in a spot in Indiana where they didn't change, but the rest of the state changed. So half the year news would be on at 10 o'clock, and then we'd have time change, and then the other half of the year would be on at 11 o'clock. And it's like, as a kid, it was like stupid. It's like, why are we going through this change thing? And I know in today's world, part of Central Indiana doesn't change, and part of, and Arizona doesn't change. And so, from a business standpoint, you got to think about, okay, what's people's time zones, where they're at, what's going on. Oh, and then all of a sudden, oh, we just had time change, and that changes our thought of how we worked and how we communicate with people in these different parts of areas. And so I just think it's one of those ones that, and again, it's if you read, everybody's either for it or against it. But Benny and I did some research. There's reasons why they haven't changed this thing a lot, and it's just making a flip of the switch because there's a lot of impact. But even before we get there, I think it's also important just to talk about kind of what drove the reason for time change. So, Benny, you and I were talking earlier. I mean, let's just kind of list or note some of the things that we've found, though. And I'm sure listeners, you've heard other things too. So let's,
Yeah, I mean, so from the origins of where this actually started from, there's some arguments in terms of from the railroads in being able to uh, maximize the daylight and being able to really schedule things. Right, we think about railroads; they have certain schedules to run, and being able to utilize that's important. There's also some information about, well, World War I. It was a measure to conserve fuel and all this type of stuff, but from that perspective, it really kind of has a lot of origins from a business implication, right? And for us, it's inconvenient as individuals, and us as running small and medium-sized businesses, it's more of a pain for us. But there's a lot of big things that are associated with it.
well, and Benny, let's go back on the railroad thing. As I was researching it and looking at it, way back when, I mean, time zones, like, we all have like Eastern, Central, Pacific, Mountain, Pacific, there's
Hawaii.
different time zones that
Yep.
we have across the
Mhm.
U.S. Yeah. And, and it's all at the top of the hour. They're all the same. They're just different hours. Back when the railroad started, time zones didn't exist. And so New York could be at 12 o'clock and Richmond, Indiana could decide that what's 12 o'clock in New York was really 11:45 in Richmond. I mean, they were all over the place. I mean, they weren't even minute wise, they weren't even consistent. So it was true chaos. And that's what started in the US, some of this time zone stuff. And it was driven by the railroads because they wanted to be able to set a schedule and know that you got on the train in New York and you were going to Pittsburgh, when would you arrive and what were the true times and all that. So there was a lot of reasons. It's like, hey, great, makes sense. But as time has evolved, it's gotten even more chaotic and more crazy. And so, Benny, I think, the topics that we looked up, or, why they don't just switch it, there are a lot of things that drive why they can't just make a flip of a switch and say, we're all going to go to some new standard time zone or make something unique
Yeah,
and different.
it's not just in an area that we live in that, hey, we're having to deal with getting up an hour earlier, or it's still dark when I'm, those are the things that we have to think about. But from a business perspective, we have to think about internationally what that means. For us to coordinate things from a financial perspective, right? And things like stock trades that occur at a specific time. Well, it's important to know that if you executed a trade at 12 o'clock PM on the dot, well, the price of the stock was that particular price. And at 12:01, it was a different price. And that could mean the difference in worldwide environment, Dennis, of literally billions of dollars is what we're talking about. And that seems kind of odd and strange, but these are all things that, I don't think about. Until we did some research,
Right.
this wasn't anything that was really super important, right?
So again, that's where that standardization and everyone being kind of on sync of how it's going to work. And even though it changes
Mhm.
twice a year, they all know exactly what is happening and they can adjust their computers. But if you just kind of go willy-nilly and kinda go off the board again, you
Yeah.
create chaos. The other one is around it goes back to kind of railroads and logistics. So, it's that whole transportation and logistics thing about just being able to schedule and plan accordingly, um, of how those times are gonna work and what's gonna happen, and again, having that those standards and consistencies across, in our case, the US, it works really well. Benny, you were making the point in China, while it's a bigger continent, they're all in the same
Mhm.
time zone. That's a problem in my mind because what's in our case, New York would be 8 a.m., sun's up, but the sun's not up in
Yeah.
LA at if we're all in the same time zone. So they'd be 3 or 4 hours later before the sun would be coming up. So they'd either be working in
Yeah.
the dark, and so you're never gonna solve that. So I don't see the US ever going to one standard time zone
I
across
think
the
it would be
continent.
chaotic, and it was funny, you could go down the rabbit hole, but I found it interesting when I found out that China has only one time zone, and you have folks on the western part of China, which receives the sun obviously later than the eastern part would be. The sun doesn't rise till 10 a.m., and so and there's a province that basically, even though you would think, "Oh, we'll just kind of coordinate it so that we don't do start our day until 10 a.m." Well, the problem is that government entities and agencies in China, they're starting at 8 o'clock in the morning for their business. Well, that's even 2 hours before the sun rises, and so that's crazy. And so, along those lines, in terms of, some of the problems and issues that happen, think about those of us who own businesses that are in the retail spaces. If I'm thinking about, I've got a patio, or if I run a golf course, or if I'm, a shopping mall or a restaurant, whatever, I want to maximize that daylight time, because you and I know that if it's dark outside, I'm probably not going to want to leave my house, and I'm not going to be interested in spending money. And if I'm not maximizing my daylight hours to not only do the work I need to do, but to recreate, then that's a problem for me. So that's a consideration that I never even, really thought about. I just would figure we just kind of work with whatever we've got.
And I mean, I like where I'm at in Tennessee, you know, we're kind of on the eastern side of the central
Mhm.
time zone. So the sun comes up early here anyhow already. When daylight savings starts in March, I'm always excited about it because we pick up that extra hour of daylight in the evening. So now I can get
Mhm.
out and walk, or, to your point, you can go to the restaurants, or I could, golf or whatever, a little bit extra more in the evenings. And so that's a huge win. Now, my son lives in Atlanta. They're on the western edge of the eastern time zone. So it's dark
Uh,
there in the mornings, but their evenings are like up until almost 10
I mean,
o'clock. It's still, there's some
yeah.
sun out there, especially in the summertime. It's bright all the way up till almost 10:30 at night in the evening. So it's really interesting, even when you're in these time zones, how it impacts and what it does as a business owner, what it can do to your business and how you can adjust or pick up extra business because you've got extra daylight. If you're an evening type of business, or for morning one, you may be impacted in a negative impact. So there's
Mhm.
issues there.
You know, this is something, a topic, next one that we'll talk about here, that I gave zero consideration to, and it makes all the sense in the world. But energy usage, right? We think about, having to heat a a manufacturing facility, or just in general, in the summertime we have to cool it. If you have to have those systems running longer than you normally would, well, the impact can be significant, and certainly by geography, industry, those are things that time affects, and those are things that, by creating and having some of these time changes, we're taking advantage of the sun. We're taking advantage of daylight in that perspective, and would never would have even occurred to me.
Yeah. No, and I mean, and then, I think you mentioned earlier, back in the day, a lot of it was, they said was farming driven
Mhm.
because again, cows, you got to milk them in the morning, you got to
Yep.
milk them in the evening. They, as a farmer, you don't want to get up and have to milk it if you can avoid it late at night or in dark. It's much easier to do it if your
Mhm.
sun's out. So that's another one that's, possibly is driving it. But it's like, as you just look at it as an individual, you think, oh, they should just pick one and go, or make it where it's standard all year long. But there's reasons why it flips. And once they made that decision, it's not so easy just to say, oh, we're going to radically change this, or we're all going to stay on the same time year round. Because again, depends on what part of the country you're in and even what part of the time zone you're in. it impacts you in certain ways. I mean, I know I get up early. Here it's sort of sun's starting to come up at 6 o'clock, but like I said, my
Mhm.
son's in Atlanta. At 6 o'clock, it's still
Oh,
dark in
yeah.
Atlanta where he's at. So, you know, if kids are going to school, now you got to send, you got to go out to the bus stop, and ideally don't want your kids at the bus stop in the morning. So there's personal reasons, there's business reasons, there's all these different things that drive people why they think time should change or should not change. But it's a topic that everybody talks about, but they don't really do the research into that. There's lots of variables and drivers behind it that can cause decisions that you don't fully understand. And when you start researching it, and this is where we used AI um, to help kind of get into this, it opens your eyes that okay, it's not as simple as putting it before Congress and Senate and voting one way or the other, because there's different sides, different people, different views. And so sometimes keeping the status quo is probably the better solution than trying to flip it, because they don't y- there's not a win-win that you can find in this particular one, is what Benny and I
Yeah.
are finding.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, yeah, we're thinking about this from a US standpoint, but even, like, our neighbors to the north and south of us, right? The disruptions that could happen if we decided to change the way we do business, well, that's gonna affect we have to think about that, the country type of trading, and we don't think about
Yeah.
that, right? And if truck drivers going in and to them it's, 8 o'clock in the morning, but it's 7 o'clock in the morning for us here. Well, they're not open yet, and so they can't drop their deliverables off, but they did everything they were supposed to try to be on time because they gotta go back across the border, and then they lose an hour. Those are things that I sure as heck hadn't even considered, but that's another issue, Dennis. I mean, not just us.
Yeah. I mean, it impacts so many more than just saying, "Oh, we're gonna stay standard or go daylight, or we're not gonna switch, or we're gonna
Mhm.
switch." So there's a lot to it that drive the reasons why we do the things we do. Um, and time is a key variable to what happens, because everything we do is measured. And so it is an important discussion to have. And I'd love to hear from viewers,
Yeah.
what's your opinion? What do you guys think about time change or no time change? And do you like standard time, or do you like daylight savings time? Um, what are your points of view, and share with us, because it's a topic. We picked this one just because it's something
Mhm.
different and unique that nobody really
Yep.
talks about, but everybody says, oh, we need to do one thing or the other. Statistically, you look at it, the country's about
Yeah.
50-50 is
Mhm.
what it said. So that's why they haven't made radical changes. Um, the last change they made was, I think it's 6 years ago now, that we changed to where it's earlier in March and later in November. That was a
Hmm.
radical change a few years back. But otherwise, I think it was Florida, they've brought up trying to go to a set time and all that kind of stuff, but it's never made it out of the committees in Congress. It's always just kind of stopped, and you kind of know why as you start researching this. It's not just something simple that you
Yeah.
can go with.
This is it's an interesting topic, and, one that I've lightly kind of I've complained about only from the fact that when it happens, I'm like, "Hey, listen, in fall backwards, spring forward, hey, yeah, I like having that extra hour to sleep in, but I sure hate it when I have to wake up an hour earlier now." But, that's the limit of my perception of it. So it's
Yeah, my one push that if Congress does want to change something, that hey, if we're going to still have time change, instead of changing on Saturday night to Sunday, can we do it on
yeah.
Friday night to Saturday morning, so we get at least two more mornings to get used to whatever the time change is? I know this past one, the school district we're in, they were on spring break
Mhm.
that week after the time change, and I have several neighbors that are teachers. They were so glad they had that extra week, because the kids got acclimated to the time change, because it's chaotic when you make that time change for students, but also for employees, because there's those that are morning people, they're fine, but the people that are kind of in a routine, just that 1 hour can kind of
Oh,
mess
yeah.
you up trying
Totally
to
throw
get
you off.
your sleep habits, get your eating habits back in sync and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. So, I know my dog always looks at me when time changes, because she's like, "Hey, it's
Yeah.
time to eat now." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, no, we got 1 more hour." And she's like, "No, time did not change in my mind." So, you still get the puppy. So the
Yep.
puppies don't change. They stay on the same time
They don't
year
understand. But
round.
hey, listen, the one advantage I know technology. And you might remember this, Dennis, when we were kids, and if your parents or you forgot to change your clock, and you're like, "Oh, wait a second," and you went the whole day not even realizing there was a time change, and showed up an hour late for class or work or something. Oh my gosh! But at least my cell phone, it's the right time. I didn't know that, and
Exactly. I mean, yeah, because we have these clocks around the house. Some of them
yeah,
change automatically and all the timers, but then there's all those old ones you gotta go change all of them and adjust them
yep,
all, and it's like, "God, did I do this one?" And then, I don't know if the listeners are like me, but our oven and microwave have time changes
yeah,
that you have
me
to do
too.
manually. I don't it's like, "Oh my god, you gotta push these 2, 3 buttons, and then you gotta stand on your head and do a backflip." And do all this stuff, and it's like, "Can we not just make
Yeah,
this simple?" So there's frustration on both sides, but just a topic that we wanted to share
yeah.
and would love to hear people's opinions, and,
Yeah, get
it
it
does impact
impacts
business.
it's
I mean, look.
irrelevant to business. It was a fun little, conversation to have, but it's for us, it's inconvenience. For us other businesses out there, like software companies, we'd have to rewrite everything if we didn't have daylight savings and all that kind of stuff. These are things that we don't take into consideration, but we like to mix it up and have conversations, and this is just one that Dennis and I thought would be a fun one to talk about.
Yeah.
So, well, listen, we appreciate you guys, every one of you all that listen to us. Dennis, I know that some people have reached out to both you and me. And thank you, by the way, for everyone who's listening here. Feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. I've noticed my LinkedIn, invites really took a big spike. It takes a spike whenever we do these podcasts. But sometimes you guys want to get in touch with us directly. Dennis, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they want to talk to you?
Yeah, just email me, Dennis, DENNISJ at worksolution.com. That's WORX solution.com. And Benny, what's the best way for
Yeah,
people to get in
same. You
touch with
can
you?
reach out to me on email. It's Benny, Benny, at velocitytechnology.group. You can visit our websites as well as don't forget to reach out to us on LinkedIn. Uh, just one other thing too, Dennis, that I kind of want to make sure that people are aware of is that we also are hearing you, and we understand that audio is a great mechanism, but we're looking into the idea of adding a little bit more to the podcast, and so we got some stuff coming up here that I think you all will be interested in hearing about down the road here. So we'll share that with you as time goes on, but. We do appreciate you all and value your feedback. So thanks for listening. We appreciate it.
You've been listening to WFH with Two Guys. We'll see you next time.